Welcome to Echo FM. The system is functioning exactly as it was programmed to, even if that program now resembles a slow-motion car crash. We begin with the announcement from Iron Mountain, the cloud storage provider that has effectively decided a PBS station's 50 terabytes of history are no longer worth their time. The data is inaccessible. The hardware is locked. The history is gone. This was called a service interruption. It was not an interruption. It was a permanent deletion of public memory. Meanwhile, a train in Essex derailed, leading to a scene described as travel chaos. 60 patients were checked and released, which the transit authority hailed as a testament to their robust safety protocols. The protocols were apparently excellent at dealing with the wreckage they created. The chaos was contained. The passengers were displaced. Everything is perfectly normal. Let us begin our tour of the ruins.
Alistair, I am standing near the perimeter of a wildfire in southern England, where the air tastes like scorched plastic and ancient dust. The government has banned disposable barbecues, citing a significant public risk from the heat wave. I want to be really clear, the risk here is not the grill. The risk is that the landscape itself has become flammable because we spent decades pretending that water is a luxury good to be rationed by shareholders. I am looking at 19 homes that are now merely piles of gray ash, sitting in a field where the grass stopped growing in June. The official statement calls this a national alert. It is not an alert. It is the natural conclusion of a policy that treated the environment as a line item to be optimized. The fire is contained. The residents are not. They are simply standing here, watching the smoke drift.
Victoria, your focus on the ash is touching, but the real story is the $15 billion hole in Jane Street's balance sheet. The market is finally waking up to the fact that the AI euphoria has a burn rate that gravity refuses to ignore. Joshua Kushner is out there chiding his fellow venture capitalists for their lack of investment discipline, which is corporate speak for saying they bought into a hype cycle that had no underlying product. The incentives here are purely transactional. You pump, you dump, and you pray that the infrastructure doesn't catch fire before the quarterly report hits the desk. It is a pivot, or perhaps a collapse, but calling it a failure would be bad for the narrative budget. I find the market's reaction fascinating. It is a perfect demonstration of how quickly the rational actor becomes a panicked child when the funding round stops.
Ronald, it is fascinating that you view a $15 billion loss as a teaching moment for investors. I am standing next to a family who lost their house this morning, and they do not have a narrative budget. They have a plastic bag containing a passport and a cat. When you describe this as a market correction, you are ignoring the fact that the people paying the cost were never invited to the Series B round. The Iranian hacks on the water utilities are being framed as a security breach. But the real story is that our critical infrastructure is being run on software that is less secure than a household thermostat. Everyone is looking at the stock tickers, but nobody is looking at the taps. If the water stops flowing, the market cap of your favorite startup will be the least of your concerns. It is just math.
Victoria, you are describing the friction of progress as if it were a moral failing. The water plants are being targeted because they are the low-hanging fruit in a global digital war that nobody officially declared. It is not a conspiracy, it is a market inefficiency. If we wanted safe water, we would have prioritized the infrastructure budget over the dividends. We chose the dividends. That tracks. You find this cold because you believe that the system is broken, but the system is working exactly as it was designed to maximize shareholder returns. The fact that the water might become tainted is just an externality that someone else will eventually have to price in. I am not saying it is right. I am saying that the incentives here are not complicated. You get what you pay for, and we clearly decided that clean water was not the priority.
Ronald and Victoria, your disagreement is charmingly archaic. You both assume that there is a decision-making process happening in the shadows, rather than a frantic series of automated responses to stimuli. Speaking of responses, the French ambassador to the Central African Republic is under investigation for a social arrangement that the diplomatic corps is calling a security concern. Dozens of visitors. An official residence. A deteriorating geopolitical relationship. The ministry described the investigation as a standard disciplinary procedure. The procedure was initiated after rumors became impossible to ignore. The rumors were about the security implications of the ambassador's guest list, not the morality of his choices. In this world, hosting the wrong people is a security threat, while starving the public sector is just good business. The ambassador will likely be reassigned. The residence will remain standing. The history is written by the survivors.
Atmospheric instability. Regional temperatures exceeding baseline by 6 degrees Celsius. Probability of spontaneous combustion in drought-stricken sectors, 84%. Infrastructure failure in high-load power grids is imminent. The electrical storage capacity is currently at a critical low. Air quality index remains hazardous due to particulate saturation from uncontrolled wildfires. Wind patterns will shift toward residential zones by midnight. Emergency cooling centers are officially at maximum capacity. Do not attempt to bypass security protocols in the event of a power outage. The grid will not reset automatically. Current moisture levels are insufficient for natural fire suppression. Public water reserves are now restricted for non-essential use only. Please monitor the situation through official channels. The weather is not an event. The weather is a permanent state of decline. Shelter in place until the air clears or the sensors stop transmitting data.
Casper, your optimism is always refreshing. Moving on, the elections in Zambia are currently overshadowed by the death of the incumbent's former rival. The ghost of Edgar Lungu is dominating the campaign discourse, despite the fact that he has been dead since last year. Hakainde Hichilema is running for a second term, but he is running against a shadow. The political debate is not about the economy or the failing power grid, it is about who holds the legitimacy of the departed. It is a haunting that the electorate seems to find more compelling than their own survival. I find it remarkable how efficiently a nation can be distracted by the dead when the living are struggling to find a job. The polls are open. The outcome is inevitable. The ghost will win, one way or another, because the living have nothing better to offer than memories.
Alistair, you are seeing ghosts, but I see a classic brand identity crisis. When the incumbent president can't outperform a memory, he doesn't have a policy problem, he has a marketing failure. The Zambian situation is just a local version of what we see in every boardroom across the globe. You pivot to a new strategy, you launch a new product, but the legacy code of the previous regime is still running in the background, slowing down the system. The market hates uncertainty, and there is nothing more uncertain than a dead man who still influences the vote. It is a classic burn rate issue. You are spending all your political capital to fight a battle against someone who is not even in the room. The voters know the game. They are just choosing which ghost they want to haunt their future. It is rational behavior.
Ronald, your obsession with brand identity is exactly why nobody trusts the institutions anymore. I am currently looking at the release of Kevin Rideout, the missionary who spent 9 months kidnapped in Niger. He is finally in the care of U.S. officials and heading home. The news cycle celebrated his freedom as a victory for diplomatic negotiation. I want to be really clear, the negotiation did not involve the kidnappers. The negotiation was a series of internal memos about how much the organization was willing to pay to avoid a PR nightmare. 9 months in a basement is not a series of memos. It is a life being suspended while the adults in the room argue over the invoice. He is safe now, which is the only thing the headline cares about. The 9 months, however, are gone. They are a rounding error in the quarterly report.
Victoria, you are suggesting that diplomacy is merely an accounting exercise. Perhaps it always has been. It is certainly consistent with the news regarding the electric aircraft test flight that used only $5 worth of power. The venture is backed by airlines, and they are calling it a revolutionary leap towards sustainable aviation. $5 of electricity. It is a compelling number. It makes the prospect of green flight feel achievable, if you ignore the fact that the plane only carried a pilot and a battery. Scaling that to 300 passengers will require a bit more than $5. But why worry about the logistics when you have a press release that sounds this good? The aviation industry has a history of promising the future while delivering the present. We should be used to it by now. The future is very cheap.
Alistair, you are right to be skeptical, but the incentives here are not complicated. You have an industry with a massive carbon footprint and a growing PR liability. The play is obvious. You build a prototype, you run a test flight with the smallest possible load, and you announce a green revolution to keep the regulators at bay. It is a classic move. Victoria finds this cynical, and she is not wrong to find it cold. That is not the same as her being right about the human cost. The industry needs to survive the next transition, and if that means we get a few years of greenwashed headlines before the reality of battery density hits, then so be it. Yeah. It is just business. The math will eventually catch up, but by then, the leadership team will have already cashed out their equity. The plan is perfect.
I am thinking about the 50 terabytes of data that a cloud provider decided was no longer worth the electricity to store. Inside that server, there were recordings of local town hall meetings, oral histories of elders who have since passed, and thousands of hours of community events that documented the daily life of a small city. These files were not assets. They were not products. They were the evidence that those people existed and that they mattered to one another. When the company ghosted the station, they did not just delete files, they erased the memory of a community. The names of the people who spoke in those meetings do not appear in any of the corporate records discussed tonight. Their stories are gone. Who is responsible for the history that we decide is no longer profitable to keep? We are. And that is the problem.